Hey everybody. So, in a really unfortunate turn of events, Bernie Sanders has dropped out of the 2020 Democratic primary. He was withdrawn from the presidential election. This is something that didn't necessarily surprise me, but I was definitely really, really disappointed when I saw it. Bernie has said that he will still be on the ballot in the remaining races. So what he hopes to do is kind of accrue delegates and then at the convention pull Biden to the left, in terms of like the party platform and, what Biden is going to be promising in the general election. And I really hope he does that. I hope he pulls Biden as far left as possible. I personally don't believe that he's going to pull him very much. That's just my personal opinion. I hope that he pulls him a lot farther than that, but I honestly don't think that Biden's going to budge very much. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to talk about what I feel like Bernie Sanders could have done differently to be more successful. That seems pretty appropriate considering his campaign has just ended. Especially because I am constantly I will criticize corporate Democrats and establishment Democrats for blaming progressives when they don't win. And so I definitely don't want to like be a hypocrite and then blame corporate Democrats and the establishment for Bernie Sanders' losses because I don't think it's necessarily entirely their fault. I do think that there are a lot of things that Bernie Sanders could have done differently. So first things first, I do not think that Bernie Sanders should have budged when it comes to policy whatsoever. I think that he should have stayed strong in his beliefs, which he did. I think that he did. I don't believe in like running to the right and like compromising on what you believe in elections. I think that it's super important that you don't do that. And I also would just like to point out that I don't think that that's even necessarily necessary because as unfortunate as it is, a lot of people don't vote based on policy. A lot of people vote on a variety of other factors. And so I do think that there is a little bit of wiggle room there where you could even potentially have policy beliefs that aren't necessarily popular and you can still do really well for a variety of other reasons because people do not vote simply based on policy. And so I do not think that Bernie Sanders should have budged on policy. I actually think that his policies are fairly popular with people if framed in the correct way, in an accurate way, not in some biased way. If framed in an accurate way, I actually think his policies can be pretty popular. But so something that I should have changed, I feel like Bernie Sanders could have changed on, is I think that he made Medicare for All a focal point of his election, his candidacy. He made Medicare for All, just his staple issue. And Medicare for All is something that's I is a really big issue for me. It's super important. But I don't believe that that is what he should have put front and center for his campaign. I think that the biggest thing that he should have talked about is getting money out of politics. First of all, I think that money out of politics, I believe, is the most important issue in politics. I think that you get money out of politics, all the other issues start to come into line. And so I think that it really is the most important issue. And Bernie Sanders is correct on that issue. He believes in getting money out of politics, but he like essentially just didn't talk about it this election cycle, and that was so incredibly disappointing because in 2016 he actually talked about it a fair amount, and I think that it's one of the reasons that we saw him actually perform a little not he performed a little bit better delegate wise, I believe, in 2016. He definitely lasted longer in the election than he did this time around, and so I really don't know why he basically didn't talk about it this cycle, especially because the people he was going against were massively corrupt in the sense that they took a lot of corporate money. I mean, Joe Biden has tons of billionaire donors. He even said to his donors that his billionaire donors, he said that nothing will fundamentally change for you guys if I become president. I mean, that is, he said this privately. He didn't say this, obviously, that it leaked that he said that, but that is something you should talk about. You should talk about the fact that your opponent, Pete Buttigieg had a ton of billionaire donors. Basically everybody. Elizabeth Warren started accepting super PAC money towards the end of her candidacy. So that is a very salient issue for people. Corruption that is really easy for people to understand. The subtle nuances of Medicare for All versus like Pete Buttigieg's plan of Medicare for all who want it. That isn't necessarily something that resonates with very many people who don't follow politics super closely. They don't necessarily understand the difference between like a public option versus a single payer healthcare system. And so it wasn't the best policy to put at the forefront of your campaign. Now, I love that Bernie Sanders supports it. I don't think that he should have changed that he supported it, but I don't think that that is what he should have been talking about all the time. I think he should have been talking about corruption. I think that corruption is something that is super easy to understand and his opponents, coincidentally, at least I believe, are corrupt in the sense that they accept money from corporations, billionaires, and they will do their bidding if they are to be elected. I believe that that is a form of corruption, and I think that a lot of people believe that that is a form of corruption, and I think that that is a really, really, really easy point to explain to people, and people understand that. It's something that even Donald Trump used in the 2016 election in the presidential primaries. He would constantly refer to his opponents as being corrupt. Famously in one of the debates, he's like, "All you guys ask for me for money. Like, I'm self-funding my campaign. All you guys are asking me for money. I'm the only one up here who's not taking money from billionaires and corporations." He was taking money from corporations and billionaires, but he knew how to frame it. Donald Trump is very good at knowing how to frame certain arguments, and he will take little nuggets of truth in things and then kind of blow them out of proportion, or take things that don't even have necessarily any truth, but he knows that he can say them and people don't always fact check. And that is one of those issues. He knew that corruption is, I mean, his big thing was drain the swamp. And a lot of people, that resonates with a lot of people because government people don't have a lot of faith in government officials. They don't have a lot of faith in their elected officials. People don't feel represented. And so it is really, really, really salient to say, like, oh, I am fighting against corruption. I am here to drain the swamp that Donald Trump said. He didn't drain the swamp. He ended up having a very, very, very corrupt presidency. And so I don't think that he has, kind of followed up on that. But I do think that that is a really important issue, getting money out of politics, and Bernie Sanders should have put that at the front and center of his campaign. He did a little bit of that in 2016, not as much as, or more than he did this time around, but he should have done more of that. He really should have hammered that home. He talked a lot about Hillary Clinton, doing private speeches for like Goldman Sachs executives and such, and that was really good. I think that resonated with a lot of people. He just didn't do that this time around. He talked about it a little bit, but it was almost entirely absent from his campaign. So I definitely would have put, I just can't stress this enough. Money in politics is such an important issue. Everybody should be talking about it. It really should be at the forefront. I love that everyone's talking about Medicare for all. I think it's a really important issue. I really want more people to agree with it, but I think that getting money out of politics is actually a much more pertinent issue. And so the next thing is when it comes to the way he talked about Joe Biden. So many times Bernie Sanders was asked whether or not he thinks that Joe Biden could beat Donald Trump. And he kept saying that he thinks that Joe Biden could beat Donald Trump. That is one of the worst things that you could do, because he loses all of the leverage that he has for many people when he says that, because for a lot of people, especially like older voters, their number one issue was electability. In the Democratic primary, their number one issue was electability. They wanted someone who could beat Donald Trump. And so when you say that your opponent could beat Donald Trump, that you could beat him, but so could my opponent, why should they go towards you? Why would they vote for you if they think that Joe Biden is equally likely to beat Donald Trump? This was a huge mistake by Bernie Sanders, and it's something that, to my understanding, his advisors were telling him not to say. But Joe Biden is actually a friend of Bernie Sanders. To my understanding, when Bernie was in the Senate, Joe Biden was one of the few people who was actually nice to him, which is really, really sad. But Joe Biden was one of the very few people who actually treated Bernie Sanders like a good person and was nice to him and would talk to him. And so he didn't want to say incredibly negative things about Joe Biden. And I understand that. I mean, the fact that Bernie would do that, like hold back because he has a personal relationship with Joe Biden. I mean, it's one of the reasons we love Bernie Sanders is because he is such a nice guy, and he really cares about people, and he cares about relationships and such. So I understand that he didn't want to go after Joe Biden. That was a huge mistake, and it theoretically could have cost him this election, because he should have been making the case 24/7. I am more electable than Joe Biden. Joe Biden is Hillary Clinton 2.0. 2016, Hillary Clinton lost. Joe Biden is going to lose again. You need to go with me. I would have won in 2016. I will win in 2020 if you put me in there. Joe Biden will lose. He will lose. He is an incredibly weak candidate. He should have been talking about that. I believe there's a statistic. It's like every Democratic presidential candidate who has voted for the Iraq War has lost. John Kerry, Hillary Clinton, and potentially Joe Biden. I don't know if there's another person on that list, but bring up stuff like that. Bring up the fact that like these neoliberal establishment candidates do not perform very well. This is something that he should be talking about 24/7. Joe Biden is a weak candidate. He should have. It's just, I get it. He was friends with Joe Biden, and he didn't want to personally attack him. That's not really a personal attack, but he didn't want to like attack Joe Biden. This cost him in a lot of different ways. The other thing that I really think that Bernie Sanders should have changed his rhetoric on, in his actual actions, I don't think should be different, but his rhetoric, he talked a lot about political revolution and democratic socialism, and we need to get, the youth is what's most important. We got to get young people, this young political revolution. That was that because the thing is with voters under the age of 45, Bernie won 70%. 70% of voters under 45. That's a crazy margin. But it just so happens with voters who are 55 and over, I believe he lost about 70. Joe Biden won 75% of those voters. And older voters tend to turn out more than younger voters. And so, I mean, we saw the result of that where he got the youth vote. He got the youth vote in droves. But when it came to the older vote, he just did not have it. And one of those reasons is that just this talk of political revolution and the word socialism, it scares a lot of older people. It scares a lot of the idea that we're going to fundamentally change the system. That was a mistake to be constantly talking about that. Now, do I think that that is what we need? Do I think that we need a political revolution? Do I think that we do need to fundamentally change the system? Absolutely. And if he is asked about it, like, don't lie. But you control the narrative, set the narrative. Bernie Sanders set the narrative for this race in many ways. He got everyone talking about Medicare for all, so he could have set the narrative in a different way. And I really wish that that is what he could have done, because he could have said, the rest of the world, I am a moderate. In the rest of the developed world, I am a moderate. I am the center. I am where things should be. With the rest, I'm not the radical. Joe Biden is the radical. Donald Trump is the radical. I'm not the radical candidate. I will fix this broken system that we have, this corrupt system. I will come in and I will fix it. Because these politicians, you don't trust these politicians. They're here, they're in the pockets of Wall Street, they're in the pockets of big business. You can't trust them. I have the track record. I can come in. I am the moderate when it comes to the rest of the world. I am the most electable candidate. Vote for me. He should have been making that argument instead of the fact that radicalism is good, that we need a political revolution, all this. I really think that he lost a lot of older voters with that rhetoric. And obviously there's minor things that should have been changed along the way, but those three things I feel like are really, really big. I think he should have put corruption at the front and center of his race. I think that he should have went after Joe Biden hard. He did not. He's friends with him. I get it, but it's unfortunate because it can't be personal. Don't make it personal. This is business. It's not personal. You got to go after Joe Biden, and the talk of political revolution and everything. Well, I do think that we do need a political revolution. You don't have to say it 24/7. You don't have to blare that on the loudspeakers. And so those three things, I really think if he'd done those three things differently, I think that we could have. We could potentially be talking about something completely different right now. And so, just to say a little bit about Bernie Sanders, I do believe that he has left his mark on American politics. This is probably the last time that he will ever run for president. I hope he stays in the Senate. I hope he runs for Senate again. But this is most likely the last time he will ever run for president. He has changed the conversation, hopefully forever. I mean, hopefully. I don't think... The thing is, Medicare for All is not going anywhere. Like, we are going to keep talking about Medicare for All. We're going to keep talking about free college. We're going to keep talking about making the minimum wage a living wage. We're going to keep talking about a Green New Deal. These things have entered the ether. They have entered the conversation, and they are here to stay because, like I brought up before, voters under the age of 45, he won 70% of those votes. That's huge. That is huge. That is the people who are coming up, they are with that agenda. And I mean, we've already seen it. Bernie Sanders has inspired a tremendous amount of people. AOC has, credited her running, her believing that it was possible to be a candidate that doesn't take corporate money, that doesn't take big money, and to still succeed. AOC says that she believed that she could do that because of Bernie Sanders. I know people like Ilhan Omar has said that they got their inspiration from Bernie Sanders. I know he's inspired me in an incredible number of ways. So he has 100% left his mark on American politics. I hope that he continues to stay vocal. I hope that he continues to use his influence. He has a massive amount of influence, particularly on the left. I really hope that he keeps using it. And just I don't think that this can be stressed enough. I don't think that Bernie Sanders wanted to be president. I don't. I really don't think that he wanted to be president. But I think that he genuinely cares about people. I really believe that he saw this like broken system and he wanted to make a difference. He didn't do this like for the fame or for the glory. He did it to make to help people. I don't think that this was like an ego thing for him. And I think that he saw the lines at Wisconsin, the people who were in lines, in hazmat suit, they're wearing the face masks, they're putting themselves in danger, because of coronavirus, and he didn't want to be pushing people to doing that. I think that he genuinely despises Donald Trump and doesn't want Donald Trump to still be president, and so he feels that the best way for that to happen is to get behind Joe Biden. I don't think that this was ever about him becoming president for him. It was about the issues, and that's why I respect him so much. I'm never going to stop respecting him. And so I just got you. Thank you, Bernie Sanders. Thank you for just everything that you've done for this country. I hope that your influence lasts an incredibly long time. I hope that you stay in the conversation for a really long time. Just, that's how I'm going to end the video. Just thank you, Bernie Sanders. Thank you very much.